I try not to be offended at how fast they run away from me, but it really isn't anything. So we are doing a sermon series that we are doing with curriculum specifically for our children and our youth to kind of get a little more out of this Lenten season. And so the title that was given to us was Jesus Got Hungry. But of course, if I had my way, it would be Jesus is hangry, right? Because I'm going to start off and say that I'm not sure the fig tree deserved to die in that story. Have you ever thought that? Have you ever read that story and been like, so Jesus, it's just a fig tree, calm down. Just a fig tree, calm down. But I do think that Jesus is trying to make a powerful point by this hangry gesture, this public gesture, this destructive gesture, this gesture that we get in the Gospels, a story told that is meaningful to us. So this sermon about how Jesus is actually hangry reminds us that Jesus is a lot more like Banksy than the Pope. Does anyone know who Banksy is? I was telling someone today. So Banksy is a guerrilla artist who is sort of famous for being infamous and being not known, but we kind of know who he is or she is. It's a whole thing. But Banksy oftentimes goes and gets graffiti on sides of building or art pop-ups. I'm starting off controversial, aren't I? Strong start. I love it. I don't know about you, but I'm having fun with the sermon series, so if you are, you're welcome. If not, just thank you for indulging me. But we're going to learn a little bit about how Jesus is like Banksy. I grew up with a fig tree and a plum tree in my backyard as a kid. Who grew up with fruit trees? Anyone grew up with fruit trees? So I grew up in LA, so I know that's weird, huh? We actually did have fruit trees. There are fruit trees in Southern California. That's why Orange County is named Orange County. Did you just learn that? Did I just blow your orange trees? Anyway. Of course, I grew up around trees, but not around snow. That's happened here. Thank you. So I always grew up that way, but I remember not really understanding the appeal of figs as a kid. I should have maybe asked the kids when they were here, do they like figs? And I think it's funny to think through, I kind of like the plums, but I didn't like the figs. Because imagine this. As a kid growing up, imagine me being a little toddler saying, Mommy, can I have some fig jam on my brie-covered crostini? Right? Because that's what figs are for, right? Have you ever seen figs in the context that wasn't a cheese board? Raise your hand, right? The cookie, Fig Newtons. Brilliant. Is it really fig in there, though? They're yummy, don't get me wrong, but... No, if you're asking for fruit, what kind of fruit do kids usually ask for? Apples, strawberries, bananas, strawberries, watermelon in the summer. Any other? Grapes, blueberries, melon. All the moms are just shouting at me, these are the things I get yelled at for not having in the fridge enough. Okay. Fruit has always been a crucial part of any diet, no matter where you are in the world. And as we know, figs and olive trees can grow in climates, particularly the ones that Jesus were in during that time. And they made nice roadside snacks when you were hangry. But I digress. Jesus, Banksy, back to that. Unlike Banksy, Jesus doesn't hide his identity unless you remember the people he healed and then said, don't tell anyone. So Jesus was not in it for the notoriety, but more in this sense for the constructive chaos of this story and this moment. I went to a Banksy art exhibit in Dallas. We're never sure if these things are official, right? When a whole artist is sort of underground and unofficial, you're never sure if I'm in this Banksy thing. Does Banksy know this exists? Is Banksy giving an official, unofficial kind of nod to it? It's always a mystery. He doesn't put his official stamp on things, or she doesn't, but I went to it and had a great experience, and I even got a poster from it. It's one of the many things in my office that is not put up yet. It's been a year and a half. Banksy has always fascinated me. The sense that we sort of know who or she is, but also there's a bit of mystery, that making art for gain isn't so much the point as being anti-establishment. Banks's art has a decidedly political bent to it, right? One of the famous ones is the girl with the balloon, right? Other things where there's like the kind of idea of throwing flowers instead of bombs, right? Just all the ways in which Banksy was described as being sort of revenge or guerrilla warfare with the art. I know that for many of us in this church, being anti-establishment holds little appeal, right? Let's be honest. Because all of us in this place are firmly in the establishment or benefit from the normative nature of what we call the establishment. We, in other words, most of us aren't so disenfranchised. I remember my first lesson in graffiti. I was a teacher, so many of you know I taught middle school. I taught middle school in East LA, near downtown LA, and I learned a little bit about graffiti. Graffiti isn't simply vandalism for the sake of art. No, graffiti is the alternative or underground newsletter. Graffiti is the alternative or underground newsletter. Think about it. Who makes the news? Who says what is important to be told? Who owns the majority perspective on information? If you live in an area where certain kind of ideas of law enforcement don't protect and serve you, you take things into your own hands. Now, I'm not advocating for revenge or violence or vigilantism. I'm not even advocating for destroying property. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Let's put this in context. We often get justice when we ask for it when something is wrong. But what about those who never see a bit of justice in that traditional sense, right? Who makes the laws? Who owns the information? Who judges who is worthy or not worthy of being treated well? Again, I'm not advocating for us all to go and be graffiti artists, but I am attempting to help us to understand this point in the life of Jesus, right? Right now, we're looking at a time where there's a big anger machine, right? Angry at things. And I wonder if sometimes we need to think through what it means for us to find justice in this world. Find justice in those worlds. Because disenfranchisement is real, right? And where Jesus' ministry, I think, intersects with the Banksys of the world is what he does in this story. Because it's not just about the figs having nourishment for him, although that's what we'll lean on for the children, right? Because it's okay to think through what it means to be a little bit hungry, overdo it, overthink about it, overreact in the midst of hangriness. But you see, those of us who are looking at this text in a deeper way, we would know that in the Near East, a fig tree was symbolic. It was symbolic of the richness of leadership within the temple, and it's a beautiful structure to maintain justice and order. And the fig tree, the fruit of it, symbolized it. So Jesus is with his disciples at this moment. He's going towards Jerusalem. Why? Do we know what's happening next? Do we know what next week is? It's Palm Sunday. I can't believe it's already Palm Sunday. Are we all just like, what? Lent has gone by so quickly. He's going towards Jerusalem. He's headed towards the temple for his ultimate showdown with the industrial, military, economic complex in the world that he lives in, that he believes has become very corrupt. And on his way, he gets hungry and cranky, and so he curses a fig tree. Literally, it wasn't able to feed him. Hangry frustration indeed, right? Because there were leaves, there was the promise of sustenance, but nothing was given to allay his hunger. But there's more to this, as there always is. Jesus is seeing this blessed leadership that God put into motion in the Old Testament and the Hebrew scriptures being misused for personal gain and power hungry people in charge. The temple of Jesus' time, is not, in a sense, bearing fruit. It's not bearing fruit to sustain the people. And he knows he may not be able to actually affect change on that big scale. He's just one person coming up against a big system that is already set in motion and in place. So I imagine for him, cursing a fig tree was saying essentially this giant hierarchy of leadership and authority is corrupt and it's going down. This is guerrilla art at its finest. This is the Banksy moment for Jesus. This is desperation on a very human scale. desperate for literal fruit, desperate for a church structure to actually do the things it's supposed to do. God's people are called out to be different, a different kind of people, to love neighbor, to serve the outcast, to love the enemy. And so when Jesus sees those things not happening in the structure that is led by people who call themselves priests and holy people, he gets what? Angry. But he's hungry. So what does he get? Hangry. Hangry. And I think it's understandable. It's understandable. Because what we know is that Jesus is in a political climate where he's trying to make change in a system that doesn't necessarily want to change. Can anyone relate? Any period of time, can we relate to these things? So as we continue in Lent, being challenged by the deep humanity of Jesus, yes, even the hangry Jesus, even the overreacting Jesus, even the Jesus that gets so frustrated he has to make a point through a fig tree, we can be reminded that Jesus gets frustrated with injustice too. Sometimes I think we look around and we go, but doesn't Jesus understand? Look at the world. What is God saying about the world when terrible things happen, particularly to good people? And you can point to this passage to people and say, Jesus definitely got frustrated with the world. Jesus definitely got frustrated with a world that he saw needing to be so different that wasn't different. Jesus got angry at injustice too. So angry that he punishes a fig tree. Jesus was angry when the church, his church, I call it church, but they didn't call it church at the time, didn't behave how it was intended. Jesus gets frustrated when the powerful abuse the powerless. That is why his lesson to us is, and the disciples that he tells, have faith. Anything you do is possible. You can even move what? Literal mountains. Why does that happen? Why is he saying those things? He angrily gets rid of a fig tree, and then he goes, your faith can move mountains. He's doing that because he sees the correlation between the frustration of not being able to move a system that is intended for injustice towards justice. But he knows it's possible. The thing about Jesus is he never just leaves a withered fig tree without a lesson. He says, you are the ones that will carry this forward. He's talking to each one of us in that passage, not just the disciples. He's not talking about praying for a new car or a new house or those sorts of things. He's telling us to pray for justice and righteousness to prevail in the world. He was praying for all of us to create a better world, full of more equality and less hate, full of justice and less abuse, full of love and less apathy. And if you don't see the need for that, you're maybe not paying attention to the world right now. Because that still is relevant to us today. Because he sees people with power and religious fervor, and he sees them and he says, you are praying, but you will never move a mountain because your prayers are not concentrated on doing what God has called you to do. Love neighbor, love self, love everyone. And so, in his hangry state, he took out that poor fig tree. Again, did it deserve it? No, probably not. But considering where Jesus ends up at the end of his journey, hint, hint, Easter is what? Where does he end up? On the cross. Not a great place. In his mission to hold the temple accountable, the church accountable, it's sort of understandable that he's frustrated here, that he's maybe a little bit hangry. But what is he hangry for? Right? What does he want the fig tree to do? If it's church leadership, he wants it to feed a world in need. Jesus, yes, was hangry for figs, hungry for figs, but even more so, he was hangry for justice. And so the question and the challenge and the thing that I want us to take away is, may we all be hangry for justice too. Amen.